Hello, church family. Welcome to the Bible study for this week. I'm glad that you're a part of it. And today we're starting a new book. Last week we finished Proverbs, and I hope each of you have started the habit of reading a chapter of Proverbs every day. Like I said when we started it, there's 31 chapters, so there's one chapter for each day of the month, and I hope you've started the habit of acquiring true, pure wisdom from God by studying and reading and going through the book of Proverbs every month. Today, we are looking at Song of Songs, is what our study guide calls it. And if you look in your Bible, some of you may say, well, I don't even have that book in my Bible. Well, sometimes it's called Song of Solomon in your Bibles. So if you will, go ahead and turn to it, and we're going to be in session 12 in our personal study guides on page 109, and we're going to be looking at chapter 2, verses 15 through chapter 3, verse 5, and the title of our uh, study is Relational Foundations. The lesson theme for this week is that God created humans to be relational, with the greatest relationship between Him and His people. Our memory verse is 1 John 4, verse 19. And it says, we love because He first loved us. And our key doctrine for today's lesson is going to be man. God created humans, male and female, as the crowning work of His creation. The gift of gender is thus part of the goodness of God's creation, and we see that in Genesis chapter 1. Today, people may want to confuse and mix up the genders and to make it sound like you can be whatever you want. But God has a purpose in making us male. God has a purpose in making us female. God has a reason for making us the gender that He made us. We don't get to choose. In our first thoughts on page 109, is talking about that children are told that God made their hands for holding crayons, not for hitting their siblings. Children may also be reminded that He made their teeth for chewing and not for biting. Furthermore, they may be taught that He made their hearts for loving others and not hating them. And so children, when we're raising children, teaching children, we teach them that God made and created them and their parts for certain reasons. And in His wisdom, He tells us that He made our lives for sharing with others, not hoarding for ourselves. And that's why healthy relationships matter to God. In our culture today, romantic love and sex has been turned into uh, something that's perverted, something you can it's shown as being freedom. We don't have to be married. We can uh, have relationships with whoever we want, whenever we want, no matter the gender, no matter the person. And that is not the way that God created romantic love and sex to be practiced. And so, Song of Solomon is the crowning um, emphasis and teaching on romantic love in the scriptures. And I like the way that my uh, Bible, it's a Life Application Bible, sets it up. It says, in reality, sexual intercourse, the physical and emotional union of male and female, should be a holy means of celebrating love, producing children, and experiencing pleasure, protected by the commitment of marriage. God thinks sex is important, and Scripture contains numerous guidelines for its use and warnings about its misuse. And sex is always mentioned in the context of a loving relationship between husband and wife. Perhaps the highlight of this is Song of Solomon, the intimate story of a man and a woman, their love, courtship, and marriage. Solomon probably wrote this song in his youth before being overtaken by his obsession with women, sex, and pleasure. And so that's the book that we're going to be studying today. And for some background information, in our study, we're going to see that the book serves as a poetic chronicle of Solomon's romantic relationship with a Shulamite woman. The poem includes four other voices: the woman, the young women, the narrator, and her brothers. The voices blend together to produce rich insights into God's wisdom regarding relationships, love, romance, and marriage. And in the first verse of the poem, Solomon comes into view. He's about to deliver his finest poem, and then the woman begins to speak. When the woman interrupts, she introduces herself by way of her longing to be with a man. She is from Kedar, and her skin shows the effects of working long hours under the sun. She had to work outside because her brothers forced her to take care of the vineyard. But the man sees her, the king sees her as perfectly beautiful. Their conversations swirl around as we go through chapter 1 into chapter 2. They swirl around their obvious attraction for each other and their growing love for one another. And then, following their conversations, the woman cautions the women of Jerusalem about waiting until the right time to awaken love. And to step back and get an even bigger picture of what's going on, is the king had gone to visit the vineyards. And he saw this woman and thought that she was very, very beautiful. Well, she was embarrassed because of her skin being so darkened from the sun. And so she didn't think she deserved his love. But the king loved her. And what he did is he went away. He came back as a shepherd. And she fell in love with the shepherd. And then when he comes back again and reveals his true identity as the king, then their love deepens. They are wedded, and they come together in holy matrimony and union, and they live happily ever after, is the story that we're going to see in the Song of Solomon. And the reason sometimes it's called Song of Songs, sometimes it's called Song of Solomon, is that Solomon wrote 1,005 songs. And this was his favorite song. This was his finest song. And that's why sometimes it's called Song of Songs, because it's the best one that he ever wrote. And sometimes it's called Song of Solomon. And to put the verses we're going to be studying today into context, and we're not studying very many, so I want to encourage you, read the whole book. We're doing half the book this week and half the book next week. But I want to encourage you, read it. It's a great story. But to put into context the verses we're studying today, the man invites the woman to join him in a stroll through the vineyard on a spring day. They talk about the threats to their relationship. She encourages him to guard the love that they share together and affirms their devotion to each other and her desire for him. And then she describes what appears to be a dream or a nightmare. She's awakened in the night and realizes that she's alone. Her longing for the man makes her leave her bedroom and search for him in the city. The guards find her, and she asks for help so that she can find him. She's reunited with him, and then they go to her mother's house. And then next week, we'll be looking at the day of their wedding arrives. The event bears the marks of a royal celebration, and after they're married, they spend their first night together as husband and wife. The betrayal of their wedding night includes his affirmations of her beauty and his love for her, and in turn, she shares her joy over the intimacy they share. Our first point in today's lesson on relational foundations is called preventive care, and it's chapter 2, verse 15, and it's on page 111 in your personal study guides. And Solomon wrote of the bride calling for the catching of foxes to keep from ruining the vineyard. He was reminding listeners of the need of putting up safeguards to protect their relationships. And verse 15 says, "Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyards are in bloom." And in Solomon's day, what would happen is they would put up rock fences around the vineyards, the vineyards to keep predators out. And the rock fences would keep most of the predators out, but a fox is able to go over it. The fox is able to find a way under it. They're sneaky. And the little foxes would get in there, they'd eat the grapes, they'd dig the roots up. And so the destruction they could cause sometimes wouldn't be noticed right off. And that's why uh, they're in our relationships, we're reminded to watch out for the little foxes that will destroy our relationships. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this verse. Like little foxes that gnaw away at the grapevines, tiny distractions in marriage can damage the relationship between a husband and a wife. The distractions may appear harmless at first. Before long, however, the distractions damage the relationship. And what I want to do is encourage you to, as we're studying through these, the Song of Solomon, as we're studying through these verses, to examine your own marriage, to examine your own relationships, and see if there are things that, distractions and things that you're doing or things that are going on that may be tearing away at the relationship, and try to identify the things that are harming the relationship. The relationship between a husband and a wife is susceptible to predators that gnaw away at a couple's devotion to each other. For that reason, a wise Christian couple makes guarding their marriage a high priority. And after we identify the things that are causing issues, causing problems in our marriages, then as Christians, we're going to work to correct them. We want to be and have a marriage and live lives pleasing to God. And so we'll try to fix those problems. I mean, it may be something as simple as learning to pick up your clothes and put them in the dirty clothes hamper. It may be something as simple as picking up your shoes and putting them away instead of just leaving them wherever. Look for things that small things. We don't have to only look for the big things, say like a guard against adultery, which we want to do that. But there's small things that will slowly but surely deteriorate the relationship that we have with each other. And as Christians, we want to keep from letting that happen. Look for the things that are, if we're complaining all the time, criticizing all the time, well, think about that. That may not be the best thing, and it wouldn't be the best thing to do for your relationships. One thing that's important to do as a couple and in all of our relationships, if we're going to have a good relationship, we need to spend time together. It's recommended, it's a good practice to set aside some time each day to spend with your spouse. I mean, even if you just spend 10 or 15 minutes a day talking about the day, talking about what happened, thinking about how the next day is going to go, what needs to happen the next day, and just spend some time together. It's also good for a couple to go out and spend some time on a date night every week or every month and set that time aside. Wise couples know the value of spending time together. Foolish couples allow their time together to be compromised. Responsibilities at work, duties at church, and demands from other family members can put a distance between a husband and a wife. At first, the distraction doesn't appear to be doing any harm, but time away from each other takes its toll on a marriage. Point number 2 in our study today on relational foundation is building trust. We have to build trust in our relationships. And it's going to be verses 16 and 17 of chapter 2. But Solomon told of the trust needed to sustain a marriage. The husband and the wife are to be mutually committed to each other. Verse 16 says, "My love is mine, and I am his. He feeds among the lilies." In this verse, notice how the dedicated and soon-to-be husband and wife are to each other. Their devotion to one another shines through her declaration that she belongs to him and he belongs to her. By declaring their mutual devotion to each other, they affirm the depth of love that God intends to have in a marriage, in a relationship with a husband and a wife. The man and the woman in this poem present a living snapshot of the way that love in a marriage expresses itself through mutual submission. When we're looking at mutual submission on the wife's part is that she is going to affirm his role as the leader in the home. It doesn't mean that God made him the dictator or the drill instructor for the home, and it doesn't mean that he's going to make every single decision. Mutual submission means that a husband devotes himself to his wife by his willingness to give up his personal preference in favor of what is best for her. He's going to come alongside. He's going to try to do all he can to make her the best and the greatest good and godly wife that she can be. She's going to come alongside him and help make him the best good and godly husband that he can be. And by putting this kind of mutual submission to work in the marriage, the couple builds trust. Our second verse under the title Build Trust is verse 17. It says, "Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn around, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the divided mountains." At first glance, verse 17 may sound like the couple is already involved romantically and involved in premarital sex, but no, instead it's a description of the intimacy that they are looking forward to, that she is looking forward to. In her description of the intimacy for which she hopes, notice that her desire for him has been tempered. They desire each other in a most intimate way, but they don't give in to their passions yet. And that's a lesson that our young couples and even the older couples that are remarrying need to learn. God's plan for intercourse and sexual relations is inside a marriage relationship only. As the couple thinks about their wedding day, the anticipation of intimacy flourishes in a couple's relationship. Trust that gives way to honor has cultivated a mutual desire for an intimate moment that remains reserved in their hearts for now. They're excited about what's to come. They're looking forward to what's to come. Our third point in relational foundations is that restraint is required. And we're going to see that in chapter 3, verse 1 and 5. The couple are not married yet. They have to show restraint. Solomon told of the desires of the bride as she longed to be with her husband. In so doing, he included a reminder that one must be careful to avoid sexual temptation outside of the marriage relationship. Verse 1 says, "In my bed, I sought the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him. I will arise now and go about the city, through the streets and the plazas. I will seek the one I love. I sought him, but did not find him." What appears to be happening in the first verses of chapter 3 is the woman's in her bed. Maybe she's having a dream, but she's restless. But they teach an important lesson about practicing restraint in romance. Chapter 3 begins with the woman trying to rest in her bed. She's restless because she can't find the man whom she loves, the one she refers to as the one I love. So in her dream, when the one that she loves is not there, she goes out in the middle of the night, which is dangerous. That is not the place for a young woman to be, is out in the city in the middle of the night. That's where the criminals, that's where the prostitutes were hanging out. But she goes throughout the city searching for him. She makes her way down every street in the hope that she'll find him. She's passionately in love with him, and her desire for him turns into heartbreaking agony when he's not with her. The next verses under restraint required is verse 3 and 4, and it says, "The guards who go about the city found me. I asked them, 'Have you seen the one I love?' I had just passed them when I found the one I love. I held on to him, and he would not let him go until I brought him to my mother's house, to the chamber of the one who conceived me." In the story, as she's dreaming and she's out in the city where she shouldn't be in the middle of the night, it's dangerous. Thankfully, there were some guards there, and sometimes we can make foolish decisions. We can do foolish things, but thankfully, God puts a hedge of protection around us. Sometimes it keeps us from getting in trouble. In a way, the guards finding her turns out to be a means of rescuing her from making a foolish decision. She may have been willing to do something that she would regret if they had not found her. The allusion to being protected from doing something foolish like throwing restraint to the wind comes into view with the presence of the guards. Now, having found him, she had to make an important choice. She doesn't want to be foolish, but she doesn't want to lose him either. And so look where she takes him. She takes him to her mother's bedroom. Instead of bringing him to her bedroom, she registers her determination to practice restraint. She's not going to give in to her eagerness to be sexually intimate with him. That kind of intimacy is reserved for marriage. Another point we want to notice is that we want to, when we're dating, when we are building relationships, we want to date people, we want to be involved with people that we can bring home to our parents, bring home to our mom, bring home to our dad. If you don't want your mom or dad to meet your boyfriend or to meet your girlfriend, there's something wrong. And our final verse for the lesson today is verse 5. It says, "Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and the wild does of the field, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time." The Shulamite commands the other young women to be wise and commit themselves to practicing restraint when it comes to intimacy. The reference to gazelles and other wild animals brings to mind the innate sexual desire that exists in all male and female creatures. The animals, however, they don't have the ability to practice restraint. God's people, however, have been given that ability and have been challenged to live according to his wisdom and to practice restraint before marriage. She goes on in the verse to warn the young women to wait until the appropriate time for sexual intimacy. Restraint must be practiced until the time is right, and the only right time is after the wedding. If we're going to have the type of intimate, loving relationship in a marriage that God intends for us to have, we have to wait until after we're married to be involved sexually with our husband, with our wife. And the takeaway points for today's lesson are on page 117 in my context, is that believers are to be careful to protect their marriages. Marriages grow through mutual submission, and that God created sex to be enjoyed exclusively within the marriage relationship. Next week, we're going to be in the last session for our summer series, and that's going to be the last half of Song of Songs or Song of Solomon. And I want to encourage you, study your lesson. We're going to be looking at the marriage relationship next week. Have a great week. May God bless you. Thank you for being a part of today's study.